What is your worst sexual experience? When I was 20, I had a long-distance girlfriend, and when she was in town, we would really go at it. You know, releasing a couple months of pent-up sexual frustration in a couple days. I got into a weird position, and it was straining something in me, I just didn't know what. I'm about to switch, but then I noticed she was responding really well. So I said to myself, man, I'll just suck it up, and went for it for a while till she got hers. We both finished and I thought all was good. She left, and a week later I noticed a bulge forming just above my dick. Fearing the worst, dick cancer or some such nonsense, I went and saw a doctor. Yep, got a hernia. Had to get surgery. TLDR, great sex. Very expensive. 7/10. It's not mine, but I had a boyfriend when I was 19 and they had a very small apartment. His mom was sleeping in the middle room and you had to go through that to get to his room. One night I slept over and I really needed to pee around 5 a.m. I got up, opened the door, went in and saw his mom fucking with the dude. I panicked and instead going back to my BF's room, I ran into the bathroom. I'd how long I was there for, but I remember them saying she's never gonna come out. I eventually did. Apologized like 500 times, and even though it was 11 years ago, I'm still embarrassed and I still have certain images in my head. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. First time doing the deed with a new GF, she stops halfway through and runs to the bathroom. Doesn't come back after like 10 minutes, and then I hear her calling for me, telling me not to come in but asking if I can go get some Depends for her from CVS. Okay? Go, come back, hand them to her without looking into the bathroom. 5 minutes later she tells me she has lost a lot of blood and asks if I can drive her to the hospital. The closest one being the hospital she works at as a nurse. We get there, sign into the reception desk of the ER. While waiting to be seen by the triage nurse, she starts to pass out on my shoulder from blood loss. They finally see us and the triage nurse asks her directly in front of me in the triage room if this is the product of domestic abuse. She says no, thankfully. Then they take her to the back and the doctors find a tear that has been causing all of the bleeding. They let her go, and I take her home. It's now like 2 a.m. and I've been riding this roller coaster for about 6 hours. I will never forget that experience, scared the shit out of me on multiple levels. Myself and a good friend went through a stint where we had casual sex, mostly because we were bored and in college. Once while we were hooking up, she asked me to choke her, so naturally I obliged. Then she said harder, so I did. Then she said harder again, so I did. Turns out, she shouldn't have flown that close to the sun. Her eyes rolled back into her head, not the good way, and she went limp. Immediately I start freaking the fuck out thinking I just killed this poor girl. She wakes up after about 10 of the longest seconds of my life, in a full-blown panic attack. I got her calmed down and everything ended up alright, but I definitely thought I killed her and I was definitely going to prison. We're still great friends and laugh about it now, but I've still never gone soft that fast in my life. On God, this is one of my biggest fears. My ex was super into rough sex and liked to be choked and slapped and degraded, the whole 9 yards. We were both each other's firsts, and seeing how freaky she was I was with it, you feel me? I ended up breaking up with her and the breakup wasn't terrible, but then I would read and hear these stories from guys about girls who told the police that their ex/boyfriends were abusing them and used the marks from all the rough sex as proof. That shit got me paranoid as hell now, and I'm uber skeptical when a girl asks me to choke her or some shit. My worst, and incidentally, first time ever having full-on sex happened when I was 17. Was briefly dating a girl in the year below me. She was always one of those super confident, super experienced girls who bragged about how good she was in bed. Cut to the summer before my senior year, months after a previous sexual encounter with her ended with me breaking an ankle, another story for another time. We're at my place, home alone, listening to music and just chilling in my bed. I don't recall the exact circumstances, but we decide that it was a good time to have sex. So we're doing our thing, making out, using hands, mouth, etc. Finally the moment arrives, I'm about to get laid for the first time ever. She's on top of me, whisper in my ear something like "warn me before you go off," and next thing I know I'm inside her. For the first couple minutes my thoughts are I don't get what the big deal is about sex, but my girlfriend is getting super into it, grinding super hard and fast, basically slamming herself down on me. Out of nowhere I feel this absolutely excruciating pain, and I swear to God I hear something snap. Somehow or another my junk and her pelvic bone have just smashed together. Without thinking I shove her off me and fall out of bed, not quite screaming in pain, but absolutely gasping in agony. Some time passes, maybe 10, 15 minutes, And I'm still super swollen and the pain just won't relent. I finally give up and call my mother and tell her I need her to take me to the hospital. A few hours later I'm lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to some painkiller, and I learn that my girlfriend sprained my penis. This marked the second sex-related injury I'd endured from her, and we broke up shortly after. TL, Doctor, I sprained my penis the first time I ever had sex. Almost died giving a blowjob. This will probably get buried. Dated this guy with dick piercings. Blew him at a weird angle once because I didn't want to move his sleeping dog off the bed and the angle caused one of the piercings to lodge deep in my throat. I couldn't believe what was happening for a second of being stuck, then completely panicked because I couldn't breathe while frantically tugging his dick. He was freaking out too, saying don't rip my dick. But I was more concerned with, not dying. It finally dislodged behind my tonsils after about 10 seconds, so I could breathe at least, but I was still stuck. We tried for another 5 to 10 minutes or so to get it out of my throat, but it hurt super bad and we couldn't. He suggested going to the hospital. I can't imagine waddling to the car naked with his dick in my mouth, driving to the hospital, and walking in like that. I'd rather die. I declined, and after another 10 minutes of trying we pulled it out and I coughed up a good amount of blood. We broke up shortly after for unrelated reasons, but I never blew him again. Edit, thank you, was not expecting this to blow up. Also wanted to add that afterwards, he said I'm really glad you didn't die. It would have been gross if they'd have to sever your head to get it off my dick. Sweet, thanks for that mental image. A. was going down on a girl she was enjoying so much she slid off the Cali King bed and caught her head on the sharp corner of her bedstand. It sliced her head open as she fell off. I came over the edge of the bed to see WRF happened and a pool of blood was forming around her head and I was in shock and assumed she died. It might have been seconds but it felt like months because officer I was just engaging in oral. You know what, I don't be alive me either, let's just go to jail, I'm fucked. Just kinds kept going though my head. She finally twitched and I realized she wasn't dead. EMT called, mess, my clothes were bloody, which certainly scarred my roommates who knew I was out to get some, and I come home covered in blood. B. was on a date, and was going good. As night went on she had gotten a cough but she told me it was just some tickle in her throat from the dinner we had. Anyway. We're getting naked and she starts a coughing fit as we start. Suddenly she's coughing up blood and saying she can't breathe. Apparently she was given incorrect meds and she was having a slow reaction to them. Anyway, rushed to hospital, she was in ICU for 2 days. She at least now has quite a nice place due to settlements. Take your pick. To quote my used to be atheist roommate, your dating life is so bad it proves there is a God, and that God hates you. You can get sex therapy and physical therapy to help along with using dilators. It can be very stressful and painful. I have it and I often feel too nervous to try practicing because of the pain. Edit, whenever I bring up vaginismus to someone, a lot of the common response is try using lube. I appreciate people trying to help offer solutions. However, it is important to note that this is not a lubrication issue. A lot of this is a psychological issue that manifests physically. Personally, when I feel brave enough to bring it up to a friend, I am looking for support, for someone to vent to, occasionally for someone to cry to. There are days I feel broken and disheartened. I feel like there's nothing I can do right, I can't even have sex, one of the basic human functions. I don't feel feminine or womanly. If a friend ever comes to you for support due to this condition, consider putting suggestions for solutions to the side and just support. Listen. Reassure. Remind them they are no less of a person, of a woman, because of this condition. Edit 2, to the creepy men responding to me privately. I am not embarrassed of this condition. It is not embarrassing, it is just another thing to work through with my amazing partner's support. And this is my experience as a woman. I don't need to hear your male opinions on my feelings toward my experience, whether it's to insult me or validate me. So kindly fuck right the hell off. My second partner ever. I was not ready for. We were going at it missionary style, except in my experience it was more of a drill sergeant kind of missionary. Meaning she would yell and scream at me while talking dirty and I'd be doing push-ups as fast as I could, basically on top of her. Needless to say, she was far more experienced. Anyways, things quickly escalated. Eventually she kindly yelled at me, punch me in the face. Me being the gentleman I am, I ignored her request. She continued yelling harder, faster, deeper, sweat pouring off my face. She sternly yells again, hit me. Confused, I awkwardly but gently slap/drag my open hand across her face, my heart beating out of my chest. Suddenly the atmosphere changed into what I can only describe as a scene from The Exorcist. At the apogee of my push-up she screams, hit me. I slap her slightly harder but I only awoke the demons. She judo flips my ass over in this sexual pincer move all the while sounding like a Spartan at Thermopylae, fight me. She flipped me again. I'm like a penguin in the water covered in sweat and spit from her battle cry. I'm terrified and I do what any man would do. I punched her dead fucking center in her fucking face and she loses it, absolutely loved it. She flips me over nose bleeding, slapping herself, slapping me all the while bouncing up and down. I was mortified. She eventually finished and at this point my bed looks like a murder scene. Afterwards she cuddled me like the little spoon I am. DL, Doctor, I do not like her Sam, I will not fuck her on a bus, I will not make a fuss, but I will defend myself when she gets rough. 2003 sophomore in college, my first apartment shared with 2 other roommates. We had game night every Friday, friends, food, and drinking. I was in my try-hard culinary phase and I made blooming onions and hush puppies with horseradish dip for snacks. One of my roommate's female friends, was kind of a horny bitch or was actually into me, never really found out, we'll call her Liz. She had previously left a crude explicit stick figure drawing under my door explaining that she shaves and has the condoms. She's all over me, wants to stay the night because it's late and the campus shuttle network is down. I can take a hint, I'm buzzed and hot to trot. She gets bottomless on my bed and starts teasing, I obligingly going down on her. Like 5 minutes into it, maybe not even, she lets out this greasy onion fart right into my face. I have the worst gag reflex humanly possibly and subsequently blow chunks all over my bed. She's grossed out and jumps off. I run to the bathroom just in case, where I find one of my roommate's full blotto girlfriend heaving some noodles and co they had for dinner into the sink of all places. Not the freshly cleaned toilet or the lined trash can next to it. I head to the kitchen and amidst stench of lingering peanut oil, finish throwing up into the sink with a garbage disposal system. Liz ended up on the fart-stained sofa for the night. I don't think she actually slept. I slept on my bare mattress with my linens in a garbage bag out on the patio. Some words were had with my roommate about picking up after his girlfriend, so he's in the bathroom scooping pasta chunks out of the sink and trying to plunge it with his hand because it's now clogged. Liz came over a few times after that for game night but anything between us had long set sail. Non-consensual? My sister molested me when I was 4 to 5. That ended up having a pretty awful impact on me, lots of feelings of shame, disgust, etc., when I realized years later what actually happened to me. Consensual? My girlfriend and I were having sex, we both orgasmed, but she liked the feeling so asked me to stay in her a while longer. Having just finished, I started getting soft inside of her. When I pulled out, I noticed that the condom that I distinctly remember putting on was nowhere to be seen. I looked on the bed, scanned the floor, searched everywhere, still no sight of it. My girlfriend started freaking out, and for some reason I decided that it was a great time to paraphrase Sherlock Holmes, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true. She looked at me, horrified expression on her face, as she realized that the condom was still in her. I ended up having to stick my fingers back in, like a pair of forceps, to fish the condom out. She took the morning after pill shortly after, out of an abundance of caution. We laugh about it now, but it was terrifying while it was happening. Pro tip, when you're finished, pull out before you start getting soft, or the condom will get lost. My ex-wife. So for the first 2 years my ex was decent in bed, not great but decent. Then about 9 months before we got married she quit performing in bed, no movements, no moans, no kissing, no nothing. No oral received, not allowed to be given, and would just dead fish ass stare at the wall, not me, the goddamn wall. I mentioned to her numerous times that I hated this and this, it made me feel like a rapist. I would often stop and tell her I couldn't do it and she would beg me to keep going. These nights I would get really depressed and feel like a complete failure and sometimes cry from depression. The last time we had sex was probably a few months before we separated. Her exact words to me were just hurry up and get it over with. I stopped immediately and we had a huge fight. She swore she thought it was a turn on. Like seriously, what the actual fuck? I ended up crying a lot that night and throwing up several times. Almost a year later I have a girl I am seriously dating who I think is incredible and she's great in bed. Now I can't come no matter what I try unless I get myself off. I know it's seriously bothering the amazing woman I am with. Honestly, I don't need to come to be satisfied in bed, but it really bothers her. I fucking hate my ex for all the emotional shit she did to me. I feel broken most days. So yeah, that's the worst for me. My high school drug dealer knew I was a vulnerable person and he kinda preyed on that for the last few months of the 8th grade and most of the 9th grade. I had a crush on him and he'd often pressure me to hook up with him regularly. I'd spend my days obsessively waiting for him to text me, you know how being a teenager goes. He'd send me snaps every once in a while, asking if I could come suck his dick at lunch or hook up with him during class, or get high. It was always my weed, mind you, which caused me a lot of distress since I was not ready to be sexual but I desperately wanted him to like me. My first time buying weed was also my first kiss with this fucker. He was like, "I've heard you've never been kissed before, that right?" And I froze, then he just leaned in and kissed me. And in the moment I thought it was kinda cute and romantic, but then he just pushed me up against a brick wall and started viciously making out with me and I had no idea what to do. He kept trying to grab my ass and rub my clit but I was only 14 and kept trying to brush him off but he wouldn't stop so I just let him keep going and as the initial excitement and novelty wore off I just started hoping it'd be over. My first time having sex was also my absolute worst sexual experience. It was with this guy while I was tripping balls on LSD while high and drunk and he was pretty much sober. The whole time he was very pushy, he even broke my bed frame and kicked my fucking dog off the bed. It was a high bed and she's a small dog, but I was so fucked up I just sat there and let everything happen. I was more focused on the patterns and weird fucking headspace I was in. He went down on me after pressuring me to take my pants off and then he put his tongue somewhere funky so it triggered my urethra and I legit #pissed in his fucking mouth. I was so fucking embarrassed. And then he just jerked his head back and was like, "Did you come?" And I was like, "No. I don't think so." And then he just shrugged and got on his knees and then was like, "It's my turn," and he just kinda grabbed my head and rammed his dick into my mouth. I tried sucking it but I gagged and then he was like, "Ugh, I'll just do it myself." He was jerking himself off and then he tried putting his dick in me and at that point I was like, "Wait, do you have protection?" Then he literally scoffed at me and said no as if I was some kind of idiot. So I replied with, "Then we're not doing this." Then he was like, "Hi Ike Moon, don't be like that," and eventually he gave up, but repeatedly tried to put his dick in me again so eventually I gave up protesting. He couldn't get it in since I was Sahara dry, thank fucking God, but after the fact, on that same night he ignored me and hooked up with my best friend in front of me, then behind my back, he told a bunch of people at school that his dick was so big it didn't fit in me and that my vagina tasted horrible like rotting fish. In short, I wish I had learned self-respect much sooner.